The morning sun rose over New Terra Colony, casting long shadows across the market district. Officer Jaho Park adjusted his uniform and checked his weapon. It was his 5th year with the Galactic Colonial Police Force, and his superiors called him a model officer. His record showed 26 arrests this month alone. The colony leaders liked his numbers. Unit 14, we have a report of a disturbance at Market Section 8. Possible counterfeit credits. Respond immediately. The voice crackled through his comm unit. Copy that. On my way, Jaiho replied, climbing into his patrol vehicle. The engine hummed to life, hovering 6 inches above the dusty road. Jiho enjoyed the respect his uniform brought. On Earth, he had been nobody. Here on New Terra, he was the law. The market came into view. A crowded maze of stalls where colonists traded goods from across 3 star systems. The Black Settlement District formed the outer ring of the market, where most of the agricultural workers lived. Jiho rarely patrolled there unless called. He preferred the central districts where the mining executives and colonial administrators lived. He parked his vehicle and spotted the market owner waving frantically. The man pointed toward a small woman examining fruit at a nearby stall. That's her, the owner said. She tried to pay with bad credits. When I called her on it, she acted confused. They always do. Jaiho nodded. I'll handle it. Sun Li was 58 years old, though the hard work of colony life made her look older. Her dark hands, wrinkled from years tending the hydroponics gardens, carefully selected a ripe orange fruit. She had lived on New Terra for 15 years, arriving on the 3rd colony ship. Before that, she had been a respected botanist on Earth, developing plants that could survive harsh environments. She didn't notice the officer approaching until his shadow fell across her. Ma'am, I need to speak with you about a payment issue, Jaiho said, his voice firm. Sun Li looked up, confusion crossing her face. Payment issue? I don't understand. The credit chip you used is showing as counterfeit. That's a serious offense in the colonies. Sun Mi's eyes widened. That can't be right. My son sent those credits directly to my account last week. Jaiho had heard similar excuses before. His training taught him that guilty people often mentioned family connections. I'll need to see your identification and that credit chip, he said, hand resting on his stun baton. Sun Mi reached slowly into her pocket. Of course, officer. I have my colony ID right here. As she reached, Jiho noticed her other hand moving toward her bag. In that split second, training took over. He grabbed her wrist. Keep your hands where I can see them, he shouted. I'm just getting my medicine, Sun Mi explained, her voice shaking. I have anxiety. Please, you're hurting me. Several shoppers stopped to watch. One young man pulled out his recording device, pointing it at the officer and the older woman. Down on the ground now, Jaiho ordered, pulling Sun Mi's arm behind her back. Please, I didn't do anything wrong, Sun Mi protested as the officer forced her down. The crowd grew larger. Voices rose in anger. She's just an old lady. Why is he being so rough? Someone call the community rep. Jaiho felt sweat beading on his forehead. The situation was escalating. His training kicked in, maintain control at all costs. He pressed his knee against Sun Mi's upper back, then shifted to her neck as she struggled. Stop resisting, he shouted, though Sun Mi had only been trying to turn her head to breathe. I can't breathe, she gasped, her voice barely audible. Please, I can't breathe. The young man recording moved closer. Officer, she said as she can't breathe. Jaiho kept his knee in place. 8 minutes passed. The crowd grew angrier. Someone threw an empty container that bounced off Jaiho's shoulder. Back up. This is official police business, he shouted, pressing harder. 9 minutes and 12 seconds after Jaiho had first put his knee on Sun Mi's neck, she stopped moving. Her fingers, which had been clutching at the dusty ground, went limp. Only then did Jaiho remove his knee. He rolled Sun Mi over, expecting her to get up. She didn't move. The market went silent as Jai-ho checked for a pulse. Finding none, he began chest compressions. Medical emergency in Market Section 8, he called into his comm unit. Subject unresponsive. The medical team arrived 6 minutes later. By then, 4 different recordings of the incident were already uploading to the colony's network. The medics worked on Sunmi for 20 minutes before the head medic shook her head. Time of death, 10:43 Colony Standard Time, she announced. Jai-ho stood back, his uniform dusty, his face blank. She resisted arrest, he said to no one in particular. She was reaching for something. A woman from the crowd stepped forward. This is what she was reaching for. She held up a small medicine container labeled anxiolytic, take as needed for anxiety attacks. Within an hour, the colony's network was flooded with the recordings. Someone had found Sunmi's ID and discovered she was one of the colony's original botanists. Her work had helped make the air breathable and the soil fertile. In the colonial police headquarters, Captain Ha-won Kim watched the recordings with a grim expression. "This is bad, Park," she said. "Very bad." Jai-ho sat stiffly in the chair across from her desk. "I followed procedure." She was resisting arrest. Captain Kim replayed the video. "I see an older woman not resisting. I see you keep your knee on her neck for over 9 minutes while she says she can't breathe. Then I see her die." "The counterfeit." "We checked her account," Captain Kim interrupted. "The credits were legitimate. The market scanner was faulty." Jai-ho's face drained of color. "You're suspended pending investigation," the captain said. "But between us, we'll probably need to protect you." The settlement district is angry. Outside the police headquarters, a crowd had gathered. News of Sunmi Lee's death had spread through the colony like wildfire. Signs appeared demanding justice. The settlement district representative spoke to reporters. "This isn't an isolated incident," he said. "Black colonists have been reporting police brutality for years. Today, the whole colony witnessed it. Sunmi Lee helped build this place. She made our air breathable. And this is how she was repaid." As night fell on New Terra Colony, the lights of ships could be seen entering the atmosphere. One of them, a sleek private vessel, landed at the colonial spaceport. A tall man in an expensive suit stepped out, his face etched with grief and rage. Tai-Woo Lee had been in a board meeting on Earth when the news reached him. His assistant had interrupted with a message. "Sir, it's about your mother." Now, as he stepped onto the colony his mother had helped create, he carried with him not just grief, but the full weight of his influence as the founder of Horizon Industries. Few people in the colony knew that their beloved botanist was the mother of one of the richest men in the solar system. They would know soon. Behind him, a team of lawyers, investigators, and media specialists exited the ship. Above them, the company logo glowed in the darkness, a horizon line with a rising sun. "Find out everything," Ta-Woo ordered, his voice steady despite his pain. "I want to know who this officer is, his history, his supervisors. I want to know if there have been other incidents. I want to know why my mother died with a man's knee on her neck." In the holding quarters where Jai-ho Park had been placed for his protection, the suspended officer slept fitfully, unaware that his life had changed forever. Unaware that the woman he had killed was not just a beloved botanist, but the mother of a man with the power to reshape worlds. Worlds like New Terra Colony. Ta-Woo Lee stood in his mother's small home, looking at her things. A watering can sat by the window. Plants filled every corner. On the wall hung her degrees and awards from Earth. Next to them were pictures of Ta-Woo as a child, as a college student, and at the opening of his first company building. He picked up a small clay pot with a purple flower. His mother had created this plant. It could grow in the harsh soil of New Terra. She had named it Hope. "Sir," a woman said from the doorway, "the colonial administrator is here to see you." Ta-Woo set down the pot carefully. "Send him in." Administrator Gil-Soo Choi was a tall, thin man who ran the colony with an iron fist. He had never visited the settlement district before today. Now he stood uncomfortably in Sun Mi's living room, looking at her son. "Mr. Lee, let me express my deepest sympathies for your loss," Jil-soo said, offering his hand. Tae-woo did not take it. "You know who I am." It wasn't a question. Jil-soo nodded. "Of course. Your company's terraforming technology made New Terra possible. I had no idea Ms. Lee was your mother. Would it have mattered? If she wasn't my mother, would her death be less important?" The administrator shifted his weight. "That's not what I meant. This is a terrible tragedy. Officer Park has been suspended. There will be a full investigation, like the other investigations." Tae-woo asked. He tapped his tablet, and a hologram appeared. 7 complaints of excessive force against black colonists in the past year. All dismissed. 3 deaths during arrest. All ruled as health complications. My team found these records in just one night. Jil-soo's face hardened. Those were official investigations. Those were cover-ups, Tae-woo cut in. And now you're here to cover up my mother's murder. "Mr. Lee, I understand you're upset, but..." "I'm beyond upset," Tae-woo said. His voice remained calm, which made his words even more chilling. "I'm going to burn your whole system down." The administrator's eyes narrowed. "Is that a threat?" "No, it's a promise. You have 24 hours to arrest Officer Park for murder and announce a complete overhaul of colony security practices. After that, I start making calls." "To whom?" "To everyone. The Earth government that funds your colony. The media networks that can broadcast those videos galaxy-wide. The shipping companies that bring your supplies. And most importantly, to my board of directors." Jil-soo paled. "Your board?" "Yes, to discuss whether Horizon Industries should continue providing terraforming support to a colony that allows police to murder its citizens." The administrator stepped back. "You would doom an entire colony over one incident." "My mother helped build this colony from nothing," Tae-woo said. "She made the air breathable. She created plants that could grow here. She believed in this place, and your officer killed her like she was nothing." Jil-soo left without another word. As the door closed, Tae-woo's assistant entered. "Your legal team is ready, sir." Tae-woo nodded. "And the private investigators?" "They found 3 more cases involving Officer Park, all with excessive force against black colonists." "Get me everything. And contact Earth. I want our media division ready to run the story on every channel. And set up a meeting with the Colonial Police Force representatives." "They've refused to meet, sir." Tae-woo looked out the window at the settlement district. His mother had lived here by choice, even after he had offered her luxury homes on Earth or any colony she wanted. "I want to build something real," she had told him. "Not just live off your success." "They'll meet with me," he said softly. "They just don't know it yet." In the Central District, Jae-ho Park sat in a secure room in the police headquarters. He scrolled through the news on his tablet. His face was everywhere. The recording of him kneeling on Sun Mi's neck played on a loop. Outside, protesters filled the streets. Captain Kim entered the room. "Pack your things. We're moving you." "Why? What's happening?" "Lee's son is happening," she said, throwing a bag at him. "He's using his money and connections to turn the whole colony against us." "Who is his son?" Jae-ho asked, confused. The captain stared at him. "You really don't know. Sun Lee's son is Tae-woo Lee, the founder of Horizon Industries." Jae-ho's legs gave out, and he sat heavily on the bed. Everyone knew Horizon Industries. Their technology had made space colonization possible. Their systems made the air breathable on 12 different worlds. Their CEO was one of the richest men in the galaxy. "I didn't know," he whispered. "Well, now you do. And he's coming for you. He's called in every favor, hired the best lawyers, and threatened to pull Horizon's support from New Terra." "Can he do that?" "He can do whatever he wants. Without Horizon's terraforming maintenance, New Terra would start to revert in less than a year. We'd have to evacuate." She checked her comm unit. "Let's go." There's a back exit. As they moved through the hallways, Jae-ho heard shouting outside. Through a window, he saw hundreds of people gathered, many holding pictures of Sun Mi-lee. "They won't let me explain," he said. "I was following procedure." Captain Kim gave him a hard look. "Were you?" "I reviewed your body cam footage. She wasn't resisting. She was reaching for her medication. I didn't know that at the time. I thought." "You thought a 58-year-old botanist was a threat? Or did you think that because she was black, she was automatically guilty?" Jae-ho had no answer. In the colony's administrative building, the Leadership Council met in an emergency session. Administrator Gil-soo read from his tablet. Horizon Industries has filed formal complaints with Earth government against New Terra Colony for civil rights violations. Mr. Lee has personally filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Officer Park and the entire colonial police force. "Can we fight this?" asked one council member. "With what money?" another replied. "Our entire budget for a year wouldn't cover one day of Horizon's legal fees." Gil-soo continued. Mr. Lee has also informed the mining corporations that if reforms aren't implemented, he will reconsider Horizon's contracts with any company doing business on New Terra. The room fell silent. The mining corporations were the colony's biggest source of income. "He can't hold an entire colony hostage," a council member protested. "He can, and he is," Gil-soo said. "And there's more. He's offering to pay relocation costs for any colonist who wants to leave New Terra. That would cost billions." "He has billions," Gil-soo said simply. "And that's not all. News networks on Earth are running the story nonstop. The videos of Sun Mi-lee's death have been viewed 2 billion times. Protests have started on 3 other colonies." The council fell silent again. "What are our options?" someone finally asked. "We arrest Officer Park. We implement the reforms Lee is demanding. Or we watch New Terra Colony die." Tae-woo stood at the window of his ship, looking down at the colony. Memories of his mother flooded his mind. Her smile when he got his first patent. Her pride when Horizon launched. Her insistence on living simply, even as he became wealthy beyond imagination. "Your father and I raised you to use your gifts to help others," she often said. "Money is just a tool. Use it wisely." Now he would use every credit, every connection, and every resource at his disposal to get justice for her and to change the system that had killed her. His assistant approached cautiously. "Sir, Officer Park has been formally charged with murder. The administrator has requested a meeting to discuss your proposed reforms." Tae-woo nodded. It was just the beginning. He touched the small purple flower pinned to his jacket, one of his mother's hope blossoms. "Schedule the meeting," he said, "and prepare the media announcement. The Sun Mi-lee Justice Initiative begins today." He looked once more at the colony below, the place his mother had helped build, and where she had died. Things would change now. He would make sure of it. The central colony court was packed. People stood along the walls. Outside, screens showed the trial to thousands more. It was the 3rd day of Officer Jae-ho Park's murder trial. Jae-ho sat stiffly in his chair. His lawyer looked worried. The evidence against Jae-ho was strong. The videos, the medical reports, the witnesses, and sitting in the front row every day was Tae-woo Lee, watching silently. "The prosecution calls Hae-nul Kim to the stand," the prosecutor announced. A young man walked forward. He was the one who had recorded the incident on his device. "Mr. Kim, please tell the court what you saw that day," the prosecutor said. Hae-nul cleared his throat. "I was buying food at the market when I heard shouting. I saw Officer Park grab Ms. Lee. She wasn't fighting back. She just looked confused. Then he pushed her down and put his knee on her neck." "What happened next?" "She kept saying she couldn't breathe. I recorded it all. I yelled at the officer to stop. Others did too. But he just kept his knee there for over 9 minutes." "Did Ms. Lee resist arrest at any point?" "No, she just tried to breathe." Jae-ho's lawyer stood up. But you saw her reach for something, correct? Officer Park couldn't have known it was medication. She clearly said it was her medicine. Hainul replied. Anyone could hear her. The testimony continued all day. Doctors explained how Sun Mai had died from lack of oxygen. Other witnesses described what they saw. The police trainer admitted that keeping a knee on someone's neck for 9 minutes was not proper procedure. When court ended for the day, Ta Wu walked back to his ship. Reporters followed him. Mr. Lee, do you think you'll get justice for your mother? One shouted. Tai Wu stopped and turned. This trial is just the beginning. The problem isn't one officer. It's a system that taught him black lives don't matter. That needs to change. Inside his ship, Ta Wu met with his team. Screens showed news from across the galaxy. The story of Sun Li's death was everywhere. Protests had spread to 20 colonies and Earth itself. The reforms are gaining support, his assistant said. 6 colony governments have already agreed to implement them. Ta Wu nodded. And New Terra? They're fighting it. Administrator Gildsu says the reforms cost too much. Ta Wu looked at another screen showing the colony below. Set up a meeting with the mining executives tomorrow and prepare to announce Phase 2. Administrator Gildsu paced his office. The 3 largest mining company presidents sat watching him. He's meeting with you tomorrow, Gildsu said angrily. He'll try to force you to support his reforms. The first mining president, a large man named Dajung, shrugged. And will agree. Gildsu stopped pacing. What? Horizon Industries is threatening to cancel their atmospheric maintenance contracts with any company that opposes the reforms. Do you know what that means? Our operations on 3 other worlds would collapse within months. You can't give in to his threats. The second president, Min Ho, leaned forward. It's not just threats. The protests are affecting our workers. Production is down 15%, and half the Earth companies we sell to are threatening to cancel orders if we don't support the reforms. The third president nodded. Lee is too powerful. He controls the technology that makes these colonies possible. The media loves him. And now he's a symbol for justice reform. Gildsu slammed his fist on the desk. He's using his mother's death to take control of my colony. It's not about control, Dajung said quietly. My team researched him. He's never been political before. He genuinely wants justice. And honestly, these reforms should have happened years ago. The cost will be covered by Horizon, Min Ho interrupted. That's what he's telling us tomorrow. He'll pay for everything. Training, equipment, community programs. All we have to do is support it. Gildsu sank into his chair. I have no choice, do I? The mining presidents looked at each other. No, they said together. In his cell, Jeho stared at the ceiling. The trial was going badly. His lawyer said the best hope was to plead guilty for a reduced sentence. The door opened, and a guard entered. You have a visitor. Jeho expected his lawyer. Instead, Ta Wu Li walked in. Jeho stood quickly. Mr. Lee, he said, his voice shaking. I'm sorry about your mother. I never meant. Sit down, Ta Wu said. His voice was calm but cold. Jeho sat. Do you know why I'm here? Ta Wu asked. To tell me you hate me. You should. I do hate what you did, but hate doesn't fix anything. Ta Wu placed a tablet on the table. I wanted to show you something. He tapped the screen, and a hologram appeared. It showed Sun Mai in her garden, smiling as she worked with her plants. This was my mother, Ta Wu said. She worked her whole life to make things grow, to create life. She believed everyone deserved a chance to thrive. Jeho couldn't look at the image. I didn't know her. That's the problem. You didn't see her as a person, just as a black woman who must be guilty of something. Jeho had no answer. Tai Wu continued. Tomorrow, the jury will find you guilty. I could push for the maximum sentence, 20 years in a penal colony. Jeho looked up, surprised. But you're not. No, I'm offering an alternative. Ta Wu tapped the tablet again. An image appeared of a facility with gardens. The Sun Mei Li Rehabilitation Center. You'll be the first resident. Rehabilitation. What does that mean? It means instead of wasting away in a cell, you'll learn about bias, about justice, about the communities you hurt, and you'll work in my mother's gardens, continuing her work. Jaiho stared at the image. Why would you do this? Because my mother would want me to use her death to create change, not just punishment. Ta Wu stood up. Think about it. Let your lawyer know your decision before the verdict. As Ta Wu turned to leave, Jaiho called out, Mr. Li, the system taught us to fear black colonists. But I chose to believe it. That's on me. Ta Wu paused at the door. Yes, it is. But systems can change. People can change too. My mother believed that. The next day, all screens in New Terra Colony showed Ta Wu Li standing with the mining executives and administrator Gilsu. Behind them was a large display showing the Sun Mei Li Justice Initiative logo. Today marks a new beginning for New Terra Colony, Ta Wu announced. The administration has agreed to implement comprehensive security reforms, funded by Horizon Industries. He outlined the changes: new training for officers, community oversight boards, technology to prevent excessive force, programs to address bias. These reforms will serve as a model for all human colonies, he continued. My mother's dream was to help this colony thrive. Her legacy will be a more just society for all colonists. Administrator Gilsu stepped forward. His smile looked forced. We thank Mr. Li for his generous support. New Terra Colony is committed to equal justice for all residents. After the announcement, Ta Wu's assistant approached him. The jury reached a verdict. Officer Park has been found guilty of second-degree murder. Ta Wu nodded. And his decision? He's accepted your alternative sentencing proposal. He'll be the first resident at the rehabilitation center. Ta Wu looked out at the colony stretching below. The settlement district was visible from here. His mother's home, her gardens, the market where she died. Phase 3 begins tomorrow, he said. Contact our technology division. I want the empathy training program ready within 6 months. Empathy training, sir. Yes, new technology that allows people to experience memories and feelings of others. Officers will know what it feels like to be treated as my mother was. Is that even possible? Ta Wu smiled slightly. It wasn't, but I've had teams working on it since her death. We've had a breakthrough. His assistant looked amazed. You created new technology just for this. My mother used to say that understanding others is the key to justice. Ta Wu touched the purple flower he still wore on his jacket. Now we'll make that understanding possible in ways no one has imagined. He looked up at the stars. This is just the beginning. 1 year had passed since Sun Mei Li's death. The New Terra Colony had changed in ways few could have imagined. Where once the colonial police force patrolled with weapons and fear, now community safety teams worked alongside trained officers. The settlement district, once neglected, now had new schools, medical centers, and community gardens. Ta Wu Li stood at the entrance to the largest of these gardens. Today was the official opening of the Sun Mei Li Memorial Gardens. Hundreds of people gathered to witness the event. My mother believed that to grow something beautiful, you need 3 things, Ta Wu said to the crowd. Good soil, constant care, and patience. The same is true for justice. He cut the ribbon, and people walked into the gardens. Plants from across the galaxy grew here, but the centerpiece was a field of the purple, hope flowers Sun Mei had created. Administrator Gilsu approached Ta Wu. The past year had aged him. Fighting the reforms and then being forced to implement them had taken its toll. Quite the achievement, Gilsu said, gesturing at the garden. Your mother would be proud. Ta Wu nodded. Not just of the garden, of the changes in the colony. Changes you forced on us, Gilsu said quietly. Changes that were long overdue, Ta Wu replied. Look around you. Crime is down. Community trust is up. The economy is stronger than ever. It was true. The reforms had brought unexpected benefits. When colonists felt safer and more included, productivity increased. When community members joined security teams, local knowledge improved response times. When officers received better training, costly mistakes decreased. "I still don't like how you did it," Jill Sue admitted. "Using your wealth and power to force your will on an entire colony. I used the tools I had to fight injustice," Ta Wu said. "Just as you used your position to maintain a system that killed my mother." Before Jill Sue could respond, Ta Wu was called away to greet a group of Earth officials who had come for the ceremony. The Empathy Technology Initiative had caught the attention of governments across the galaxy. At the edge of the settlement district stood a large building with gardens surrounding it. Above the entrance, a sign read Sun Mei Li Rehabilitation Center. Inside, 20 former officers worked and studied. The center combined education, therapy, and community service. Jai-Ho Park tended a row of plants in the main greenhouse. His hands, once used to restrain and control, now carefully moved soil around delicate seedlings. A year ago, he had entered this place angry and defensive. Now his face showed the marks of someone who had faced hard truths. A group of visitors entered the greenhouse. Ji-Ho recognized Ta Wu Li immediately. With him was a woman in a white lab coat and several officials. "This is where we first tested the empathy technology," the woman was explaining. "The results exceeded our expectations." Jai-Ho continued working as they approached. He had met Ta Wu several times over the past year, but each meeting still filled him with shame. "Jai-Ho was one of our first participants," the woman said. "He experienced a full memory transfer, living through his victim's final moments from her perspective." One official looked uncomfortable. "That sounds like punishment, not rehabilitation." "It's neither," Jai-Ho said, surprising himself by speaking up. "It's understanding." The group turned to look at him. Tai Wu nodded for him to continue. "I felt what Ms. Li felt," Jai-Ho explained, setting down his gardening tools. "Her confusion, her fear, the pain, the desperate need to breathe. But I also experienced her memories, her life, her love for her son, her pride in this colony." The woman in the lab coat smiled. "The technology doesn't just transfer the traumatic event. It provides context. The participant experiences key memories from the subject's life." "How is that even possible?" one official asked. "Brain mapping and neural pattern recording," she explained. "Ms. Li underwent regular brain scans as part of a health study. We had her neural patterns on file. The technology reconstructs experiences from those patterns." Tai Wu stepped forward. "The point isn't the science. It's the result. Jai-Ho, tell them what you learned." Jai-Ho looked at the group. "I learned that I never saw Ms. Li as a real person. The system taught me to see threats, not people. But now I understand what I took from the world. Who I took." He turned to Ta Wu. "I can never give your mother back to you, but I can help make sure no one else makes my mistake." Tai Wu nodded. "And that's why the empathy technology works. It creates true understanding, not just intellectual, but emotional." As the group moved on, Jai-Ho returned to his plants. The tiny purple flowers reminded him of Sun Mi's smile, a memory that wasn't his, but that he now carried as if it were. Later that day, Ta Wu stood on the observation deck of his ship, looking down at New Terra Colony. His assistant handed him a tablet. "The Earth government has approved funding for empathy training in all colonial police forces," she said, "and 12 more colonies have adopted the Sun Mei Li Justice Initiative reforms." Tai Wu nodded. "And Horizon's new focus. The board fully supports redirecting 30% of our resources to the Justice Technology Division. The new empathy systems will be ready for wide deployment within 6 months." A year ago, Ta Wu had been focused solely on getting justice for his mother. Now he saw a bigger picture. His mother's death had opened his eyes to injustices throughout human colonies. Horizon Industries, once focused only on making planets habitable, now worked to make societies equitable. "Sir," his assistant said hesitantly, "there's a message from Jeho Park. He's requesting permission to join the outreach team." The outreach team traveled to other colonies, sharing their experiences and helping implement reforms. It was surprising that Jeho would volunteer. "What do you think?" Tawu asked. "He's completed the program. His evaluations are excellent. And having the officer involved in your mother's death now advocating for change, it's powerful." Tawu thought about it. A year ago, he had hated Jeho with every fiber of his being. Now he saw a man transformed by understanding. "Approve it," he said finally, "and send him the memory file of my mother's garden on Earth. The one from her 30th birthday." His assistant looked surprised. "That's a personal memory, sir." "Yes, but he should know more about her than just her death. If he's going to speak for her, he should know what made her happy." As night fell over the colony, lights glowed from the settlement district, no longer separated from the rest, but now the heart of the community. The Sun Mei Memorial Gardens shone brightest of all, the purple hope flowers glowing softly in the darkness. Tawu touched the dried flower he still wore on his jacket. His mother had always told him that money and power were tools, nothing more. How you used them defined you. 1 year, he said quietly to himself. "We've done so much in 1 year, Mom. But there's more to do." He looked up at the stars, where other colonies circled other suns, places where fear still outweighed justice, where some lives were valued less than others. "This is just the beginning," he promised. In the greenhouse below, Jeho Park received the memory file. When he activated it, he found himself in a garden on Earth. Sun Mei, 30 years younger, laughed as she showed her young son how to plant a seed. "The secret is to believe in what you're growing," she said to the boy, "even when you can't see it yet." Jeho watched as young Tawu carefully placed the seed in the soil. On that day, decades ago, a boy learned how to nurture life. And now, that lesson had spread across the stars, transforming worlds. The seed Sun Mai had planted was justice, and it was finally beginning to grow.